Hi, I'm Thorsten, and today I want to talk to you about Hawkman. Not any Hawkman, but the Golden Age Hawkman, the origin of the character itself in the pages of Flash comics. The character's origin was retconned many times over the years, but this is the original from 1940. This video will have a non-spoiler in the spoiler section, and I will use chapters to indicate where we are in this video. So, first off, let's review the book itself. So here we are looking at the dust jacket, and it really matches nicely on the other DC Archive editions in its style. And under the dust jacket you get this fake leather look with a shiny Hawkman logo. For the Golden Age, that logo is golden. For Silver Age editions, the logo is bronze for whatever reason, but here it's golden. The book has zoned binding, but with only 224 pages, the eye is rather small, but it also doesn't need to be bigger. The book was printed in Hong Kong in 2005, and no matter where you are in the book, on the first or on the last page, it does not close on you, it stays open. The paper quality is this thick matte paper, and I found it to represent the art very well. Let's talk about what's collected in this book. Those are Hawkman's first 22 appearances in the pages of Flash comics. Those stories in here are all 8 to 12 pages long. Flash Comics #1, along with the following books, are all anthology stories that collect the Flash, Hawkman and other characters. Flash Comics #1 came out in November 1939, even though this issue had a cover date of January 1940. That's just 1.5 years after Superman's first appearance in Action Comics #1 and just 6 months after Batman's first appearance in Detective Comics 27. All stories in here are written by Gardner Fox. Gardner Fox is probably best known for creating The Flash, Hawkman, Sandman and Dr. Fate, but also for his long run on the Justice League of America later in the 1960s. Here he wrote a new anthology series that went all the way through the 1940s. It was called Flash Comics. Gardner Fox would later recall that he watched a bird outside his window and imagined a winged man, a vision that would soon turn into Hawkman. There are 2 artists contributing to the issues collected in here. Dennis Neville provided the art for the first 3 issues before Sheldon Moldoff took over the run with issue 4 and made it his own. Sheldon Moldoff also wrote a foreword in which he talks about how he would go to the local library, do research on ancient weapons, and request pictures of the places Hawkman would go in the next issue, using those as templates to make the book more realistic. And I think for stories from the 1940s, that went very well. The art aged with time, something that can't necessarily be said about the writing. But of course, those are stories from more than 82 years ago. I don't know how old you had to be to read those in the 1940s when they came out, but let's assume you were 8 years old. That means you are 90 years old now. So one can safely assume that the generation of people who read those stories when they came out is coming to an end. Which I think makes it even more important to preserve that age of comics, because there aren't many people around anymore who can talk about that time firsthand. Let's talk about the book without too many spoilers. Carter Hall is a wealthy collector of weapons, a research scientist, and the reincarnated Egyptian prince Khufu. In issue 16, Hawkman actually says he has been reincarnated many times before. Carter Hall is also an archaeologist and a collector who created a costume that's powered by the 9th metal that allows him to defy gravity. He's facing the reincarnation of Set, his arch-nemesis, and he reunites with his reincarnated love interest, Shira Saunders. So much for the premise of this book. Let's dive into spoilers. I'd like to give you a short synopsis of each issue before talking more about my opinions of this book. Issue 1 kicks off by Prince Khufu and Shira getting killed by Hassheth in ancient Egypt. All three characters are reincarnated in the 20th century. Carter Hall reunites with Shira by accident, and he disguises himself as the ancient hawk god Anubis, using wings made of ninth metal to defy Earth's gravity. He fights and defeats Dr. Hester, the reincarnation of Hassheth. In issue 2, Carter Hall and Shira are engaged. Plenty of time seems to have passed since they ran into each other in issue 1. They are facing Alexander, who wants to expand his empire using a weight gun. Hawkman finds that the ninth metal isn't affected by the weight gun and defeats Alexander in his own house. Issue 3 has Una drugging and kidnapping Dick, who's Carter's friend. Dick has developed a secret to eternal life. Una wants to steal that from him. Hawkman swoops in and kills Una. Dick and the other scientists who were captured are now free and promise to keep Hawkman's real identity a secret. In issue 4, Hawkman stops a hypnotist who scams people for money by hypnotizing himself. In issue 5, Hawkman travels to Arabia to assist an agent in her fight against assassins. The art of the landscape is pretty impressive for that time. The writing is full of negative stereotypes and racist comments against Arabs though. It's a story from 1940 and it shows. Issue 6 continues the story from the previous issue as Hawkman tries to help Agent Ione escape Arabia. Ione is kidnapped and brought to a slave market. Hawkman is soon captured as well and sold to Queen Sheba. In her dungeon he meets Major Brandt, a captured fellow American. Hawkman escapes and defeats the Queen and frees the other captives. In issue 7, Hawkman faces a statue that's come to life. He ends up killing the creature and his maker. In issue 8, a professor who uses a machine to increase sunspot activity on the sun to then cause chaos on Earth. Hawkman follows him to South America, where he is able to stop those plans. In issue 9, we're introduced to the Kogats. The Kogats are creatures living underwater. Their plan is to race to land and conquer the world. With the help of Poseidon, Hawkman defeats the Kogats. He eliminates the entire population, sinks a few ships in the process, and seemingly also kills his friend George. In issue 10, Carter Hall loses an auction of an old gun. He decides to break into the winner's house, disguised as Hawkman, to find out why the bidder paid so much money. The gun contained a map of an old mine hiding a treasure. Hawkman travels to that mine and prevents the gold to be stolen. Then he returns it to the granddaughter of the original owner. In issue 11, a real estate owner is scamming new buyers. Hawkman helps the unknowing Shira to deliver evidence to the police to get the crook arrested. Carter and Shira's relationship is unclear here. He's trying to hide the fact that he's helping her. As we get to issue 12, Tommy is being established as a friend of Carter Hall who doesn't know about him being Hawkman. An evil doctor uses women to drug his victims. They are using drugs to weaken their hearts and inherit their fortunes after they die. Hawkman captures the doctor and his accomplice. Tommy recovers in the end. In issue 13, during a show, a tiger kills a guest, but the event is somewhat shrugged off. It does lead to Hawkman investigating the incident and discovers that the animal trainer is actually a doctor who transplants human brains and eyes into tigers to do their bidding. In issue 14, a man called Karvek uses old rites to bring the ancient alligator god Scorio into existence. He made a flame gun and tried to take over the world. Hawkman stopped him. Things stay supernatural in issue 15. Alvin invented a floating hand, killing his father to inherit his estate. He is then double-crossed by his lover, who steals a diamond from him, taking Alvin's sister and Shira hostage. Of course, Hawkman saves the day in the end. In issue 16, Shira is off on an expedition to Mongolia. News reach Carter Hall that bandits have attacked the expedition and killed everyone in it. Hawkman flies to Mongolia to investigate. The raiders halt, seeing Hawkman's weapon, the Dravidian sword formerly belonging to the ancient god Icaro. Some come to his aid, others follow the rebel leader, trying to capture him. Hawkman kills the rebel leader, receiving support from the king. She-Ra is the sole survivor of the expedition. Everyone else's death is somewhat shrugged off with a "too bad," but at least She-Ra can write a report about the ancient city. In issue 17, an opera singer is killed by her ex-boyfriend. He disguised himself as Egyptian mummy and is brought down by a trap his henchmen set for Hawkman. In issue 18, She-Ra's cousin first got rich discovering gold in Yukon, then gets stuck due to a fire caused by the leader of the Alaskan food company who wants to take their claims. She-Ra takes a plane to help him. Hawkman follows her. She-Ra is captured, Hawkman rescues her. Carter Hall makes a comment that he invented the 9th metal. Interesting. In issue 19, a professor invented a cold light weapon. He fakes his own kidnapping and later death as he turned into a criminal himself to use his invention for evil. Hawkman figures it out and wins a bet against She-Ra. She has to treat him to a fancy dinner. With meal prices between $15 and $25, you have to remind yourself that this was a lot of money in the 1940s. In issue 20, a criminal is attacked by another. Hawkman helps him to arrest the attacker, and in the end he went on to join the Third Degree Squad. In issue 21, a spaceship from the planet Neptune arrives on Earth. Hawkman finds 2 giants on the ship. Both are dead. He recovers a giant egg from the ship, supposedly their unborn child. Noel, who's jealous of Carter, breeds and raises the giant child. He tells the child to go and kill in the name of Carter Hall. The child from Neptune does as he's asked. Hawkman fights and defeats the giant and reveals his friend Noel to be behind all of it, getting him arrested. In the last issue, issue 22, the killer gang robs and steals. She-Ra is a witness to one of their crimes. They go after her. Their leader, the police commissioner's son, tries to separate her from Carter. Not knowing about his true intentions, she accepts his invitation. His true motive is revealed when Hawkman saves She-Ra, who once again is depicted as a gullible, dumb girl constantly in need of saving. And that's where the book ends. It does not collect the first time Hawkman talked to birds in issue 23 and becomes the Hawk's new chieftain. It does not collect She-Ra becoming Hawkgirl in Flash Comics number 24 or Action Comics number 5. Collecting those 2 issues would have added only 18 more pages that would have gone a long way to explaining the character. They didn't do that. Even though DC stopped doing the archive editions, hopefully those stories will be collected one day. So what do I think about those stories? How do they hold up over time? And what are some of the unanswered questions I'm left with after reading those? The relationship between Carter and She-Ra isn't clear at all. Both meet in issue 1. In issue 2, they are already engaged. She-Ra doesn't show up for the following couple of issues at all. Then in issue 7, she is referred to as a friend of Hawkman. When we meet her again in issue 11, Carter hides the fact that he's helping her in the background and lets her take all the credit. In issue 15, Carter drops off the daughter of a murder victim at his house, saying she'd be safe with She-Ra, indicating that they do live together. But in issue 18, each of them has their own apartment, though they act like a couple when going to the opera together. In issue 19, Carter and She-Ra are heading home together. I feel it's assumed that they live together at this point. But then in the end of the issue, She-Ra loses a bet and has to invite Carter for dinner. He ends up sending her a check via mail, indicating that she has her own apartment, so they don't live together? It's very confusing. In issue 21, a friend of theirs, Noel, confesses his love to She-Ra, asking for her to marry him. She-Ra tells him that she's in love with Carter. In issue 22, though, she is going on a date with the police commissioner's son. Carter Hall reassures the reader that he isn't jealous. But there you have it. It seems to be very complicated. Those are stories from the 1940s. The depiction of women needs to be viewed through the lens of history. And I like that those stories are published the way they were told back then, because it exposes the dismissive depiction of women at that time. They are not taken seriously, require constant rescuing, and mainly function in stories to be first tossed around, then later rescued without having their own voice. For women to identify with such role models would probably mean to become complacent with that role in society. There's no female character encouraging women to be more than just a supporting cast. The first time She-Ra actually proved to be useful is in issue 3 of Silver Age Hawkman in the fall of 1964. That's 24 years after this book, and still written by Gardner Fox. We also see Hawkman killing his enemies, some even if he can avoid it. In issue 5, he made a point to turn around after the action been already over and kills the assassin leader. In issue 9, he destroys the entire Kogat's colony. The tidal wave also causes an unknown number of ships to sink. Hawkman kills the majority of his enemies. There is no reflection on those actions, and it's rather seen as the logical end to each story. In issue 16, Hawkman executes a rebel leader because the king of Mongolia told him to. Hawkman is rather ruthless in general. Civilians dying as part of the action is shrugged off or not even addressed. In issue 17, Hawkman actually knocks 2 bystanders unconscious because he doesn't want to have witnesses around while investigating. And then there's Hath Set. Supposed to be Hawkman's arch nemesis, he only shows up in the first issue. I had expected Hawkman's arch enemy to be more present, but I guess that comes later. There are a few things though that I want to point out that I think were ahead of their time. There is a 2-story arc in here. I did not expect to find something like that in a Golden Age book. Hawkman traveling to Arabia spans from issue 5 to issue 6. In issue 6, it picks up where issue 5 left off. I find that pretty advanced for this time. With regards to the art, there's a panel in issue 7 that extends into the next one. It's the only time this happens in this book, but it's also something I haven't seen in Golden Age stories myself. Those are 2 panels showing one image. In this collection, it's on page 82. That also is pretty advanced for its time. I was also impressed by the details of those Arabian cities in issue 5 and 6, and Moldov generally does a great job of creating detailed background art. Of course, Hawkman in the Golden Age would continue in Flash Comics until it was cancelled in 1949 with issue 104, and in All-Star Comics until 1951. The character of Hawkman would then be revived 12 years later in 1961, first in The Brave and the Bold, then Mystery in Space, before getting its own title in 1964. That, of course, is the beginning of the Silver Age, but that is for another time. I hope you enjoyed my overview of the Golden Age Hawkman. Let me know if you would like to have more of Hawkman's Golden Age appearances collected, or would even want to have a Golden Age Hawkman omnibus. Maybe one day. Until next time, this is Torsten, and thank you for watching.